Jeanette Hawk is Lakota. She's 17. She sits alone on a bed in a cinder-block cell in a facility where she's incarcerated, far from home. She feels lonely and depressed, and she's struggling with PTSD. She's not receiving culturally appropriate services to address her ongoing mental health issues or the expected challenges of rejoining the community once she is released. Jeanette's story begins in the 1860s, when the United States first began to assert federal control over Native youth by forcibly removing them from their communities and placing them in boarding schools. Jeanette's great-grandparents and grandparents, on both sides of her family, had been rounded up, taken away from their families, and sent to boarding schools in other states far from their homes as part of the U.S. policy to eliminate Native American cultures and peoples if they didn't assimilate. Young people in the boarding schools were not allowed to speak their languages or to engage in any cultural or spiritual practices. They were severely punished if they did. Thousands of Native American children and youth endured physical, emotional, and sexual abuse. Many never returned home, and their whereabouts are still unknown today. The boarding schools disrupted transfers of cultural knowledge from one generation to another. These disruptions have been passed down and have directly created the circumstances Native youth struggle with today. The legacy of exploiting, excluding, and denying Native youth basic needs, education, healthcare, and opportunities have robbed them of their chance to live safe and fulfilling lives. Jeanette's mother tried to care for her as best as she could, but she struggled with her own unresolved trauma. Jeanette's father was not around. Although very intelligent, Jeanette struggled in school, and she was often bullied by other students and targeted by some teachers because she was Native American and others who thought she was just being lazy. Over the course of her teenage years, Jeanette developed a criminal history of truancy, vandalism, underage drinking, theft, and fighting, all symptoms of unresolved historical trauma. This isn't the first time that she's been incarcerated. The rest of Jeanette's story and the possible outcomes for her depend on a number of factors. For example, she can be prosecuted by 3 separate justice systems: tribal, state, and federal. Indian country's maze of jurisdiction was created by years of assimilative federal Indian policy and Supreme Court decisions. And as a result, there's not healing for Jeanette or others like her. There's only punishment. To change this, we must actively engage in meaningful, inclusive justice reform. This reform begins with engaging in relationship building with Native nations. It's been demonstrated time and again that connecting with culture creates protective factors for Native youth. Some youth may not fully know their connections to a Native nation, or they may be embarrassed or afraid to disclose that relationship. The only way to accurately identify Native youth and to connect them with their nations, their cultures, and their communities is to ask in every single case and notify every nation in which the youth may be a citizen or eligible for citizenship. Once the Native youth's nation or nations has been identified, it should be invited to collaborate in assessing the youth, identifying appropriate services, and then connecting them. In relationship building with the Native nation, agencies increase the pool of resources available to serve the youth and provide rehabilitative support rather than punishment. Supporting Native youth uplifts our shared futures and common values. Whether you're a justice worker, a youth leader, a teacher, a neighbor, or a youth volunteer, there are countless ways you can support positive outcomes for Native youth. Learn more about diverse Native nations and their citizens. Support youth justice reform. Become an ally. Volunteer at school or in your community. Offer financial or in-kind support to Native-led, community-based organizations and initiatives, and donate to Native advocacy organizations like the Association on American Indian Affairs. To learn more about U.S. relations with Native nations and the issues challenging Indian country, contact the Association on American Indian Affairs. The association can provide training and assistance to support change.